Chapter 11. Over the years that followed, the detail of what Grace saw in Mobius on their many adventures only add to her suspicion that there was more to both 87 and Mobius than ego and daydreams, though sanity demanded she not entertain that idea often. Despite that, their time together developed much of her outlook, and the seemingly impossible had begun to appear ever so simple, so as to seem obvious, like particle-wave duality and quantum tunneling. Living things were hybrids, physical particles and waves interacting in both the physical and non-physical realms, using both matter and synapses to parse information, allowing people to pass from one to the other through their biological transistor, the human mind. It certainly seemed a transistor of sorts, enabling a seamless transition between the two, allowing individuals to escape their bond particles and travel as waves along the lattice of Mobius, something they did daily, albeit subconscious or asleep. She found it ironic that they were perhaps most awake when they were asleep, and more asleep when they were awake and fixed to one position and perspective, attached to these particles which distort space-time. To think these ideas were from her seemed ridiculous, though the alternative was far more unnerving. She quickly decided that little good could come from dwelling on semantics, so instead chose to simply enjoy her imagination. It was a saving grace, an oasis she could retreat to, helping her understand a world that made little sense as it stood. A world in which you couldn't trust what you saw or what you were told. A world in which information seemed to be forever at odds with observable fact, and where monsters tore at you from within those you trusted. From an early age, her world had been small and incredibly dark at times. But Mobius and 87 had opened a door, let in some light. Since Inter had been established, it had drawn a close to the Civil War and the troubles they'd faced. Dad's job allowing them this comfortable but small house in the first, which, although wonderful, meant he often worked very long hours. The little time left over he spent with them, gaming with Resnick or discussing big ideas with Grace, who by now was completely taken with quantum physics, theories of entanglement and general relativity to name a few. But in between these brief golden moments, Grace and her older brother were left home with Mum. She didn't realize it back then, but this first authority figure had come to live forever in her mind as a stark warning about self-proclaimed moral virtue, victimhood, and the nature of power. Grace's mother, Erin, was incredibly beautiful, with an exotic face and long dark hair, a stark contrast to Grace's red curls, green eyes, and pale complexion. Her earliest memory was of incredible pain. When sleeping, Grace would at times find herself back in that dark place, unable to breathe in such pain. It felt as though the inside of her face was burning, hot and cold simultaneously, and she had no sense of smell. She was alone. It was dark, and she was crying, a nauseating sickness welling up. She couldn't recall what had happened, just the pain and a knowing that she was alone, and with it, this strange sense she was not. An inhuman peace had blanketed her. Its warmth not only removed pain and discomfort, but she felt it fizzing through her veins. She felt renewed, clean. As an infant, she could remember being marched to her room underarm and thrown against the wall before dropping to her bed, watching the door slam shut to her cries. She'd often be forced into a dark room for hours on end in the middle of the day, and although as she got older, the door was rarely locked, the penalty for coming out was a beating. It wasn't all bad, though. At times like these, peering through a small crack in the curtains and watching others play in the hot sun, Grace would dive into glorious pools of her imagination, swimming onto adventures that would transport her around the world to foreign shores she called home. A bit like James and the giant peach, Grace mused, sinking into her pillow on one such occasion, being stuck on the hill, watching the world below. 87 had popped up beside her on Playmont Beach, overlooking golden sands and crystal waves of Jersey Island's coastline, where her imagination had swept. To a time before things had dried up and waters became acidic. The simple, the natural, the beautiful captured a dreamlike world she longed for. Its harmony of normality sang to her in a way that only those deprived of such could hear. A notion she digested often, and like a body long starved of nutrition, just the scent of something real lit every nerve, woke every cell in her. Glancing over blue waters and the network of caves in mind, she sat them in the cafe overlooking the beach, cakes of all types and peppermint tea swirling into formation to decorate their sea view table. James wasn't so lucky, she ventured, contrasting situations. Well, 87's head tilt in amusement. His mother was eaten alive by a rhinoceros. That's not funny. It is when you think about it, he shrugged rather unsympathetically. A rhinoceros is the symbol of kindness, gentleness, and tolerance, as well as the need to exercise your powers of perception. Like your mother in the Troubles, it ate them alive. I'm surprised you don't find it ironic that Dahl used such a means for his protagonist's kind and tolerant parents' untimely demise, the result of being caught off guard by such a beast. Grace thought on it. The rhino had struck her as an odd choice, but come to think of it, in hindsight, it was almost prophetic. Her mind drifted over how the troubles arose before resting on Mum. She'd often professed to be all those things her actions could not reflect. She knew it wasn't malicious, that Mum was almost like that rhino, that she could have been all those wonderful things if it were not for the fact she was out of her element, panicked. Her mind raced to other oddities of his novel. The magic worms? Perception well used provides insight that's rather like magic, allows things without voice to speak. Those magic worms changed the nature of those they found. They spilt out, sharing ability never intended for those who received them. It led to unnatural relationships, chaos, and disorder, but a happy ending nonetheless. He eyed her curiously as a smile grew on his handsome face. What else did you notice? He watched her mind race over the mechanical shark, autonomous technology and AI, like a beast that rose up, out of the depths of chaos, James and his friends battling it back. He was prepared to sacrifice himself to save his friends. Beings considered little more than pests to most, but who behaved far more human than the people around him. Grace thought on it a while. Come to think of it, all his stories artfully underpin the need for a closer look, and the idea that things are seldom as they seem, that not all adults could be trusted, and words could be very deceiving to those who weren't paying close enough attention. Danny Champion of the World ends with a plea for children to grow into lively, cheerful, and high-spirited parents. The stuff all good futures are made of. 87 smiled thoughtfully down at the cakes but never ate. Instead, he continued, whispering secrets of Dahl, this ex-spy and fiction writer, who, although exist in their world, had lived predominantly in one few others ever realized, distilling truths woven to the tales he told, ones a child could absorb and extrapolate, truths from a world completely unseen by most and yet formed their very climate, a place he spent most of his time. Its secrets seeped through pages, passing on perception and intuition, helping children make sense of a world that at times seemed completely at odds with observable fact. The twits show in simple terms the power of psychology, 87 volunteered. How subtle incremental changes, mind games, are able to steer people and populations, enough to turn even the tyrant puppeteers themselves on their heads. To look like a pair of twits? Grace grinned, recalling the ending. What about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory?